They sitting in on this trial.
And Heather, court has wrapped up, as we just mentioned, for the day.
Anthony, it did. It actually ended a little bit early, around 4:15 today. The judge had said she was willing to stay until 5 o'clock, but the state called 5 witnesses to testify today, and the last one leaving the jurors with some very graphic images. It was the medical examiner, and pictures of Jared Bridegan after he was killed were shown to the jurors. Some of them noticeably had their hands on their mouth. Very, very graphic images. Now, today, the state and the defense each spent about an hour on opening statements spelling out their case for this jury. The state has the burden to prove that Mario Fernandez Saldana solicited Henry Tenen to murder Jared Bridegan. Now, both the state and the defense do not dispute who they say was the gunman, Henry Tenen. But the defense spent much of its time today saying that Mario Fernandez was not at the crime scene and that he did not have anything to do with Jared Bridegan's murder. Our Riley Phillips continues our team coverage. She's been sitting in throughout this trial with me in the courtroom. And Riley, we heard Henry Tenen's name mentioned a lot today in those opening statements.
Yes, Henry Tenen has also been charged with first-degree murder and is accused of being the one who shot and killed Jared Bridegan. Now, the state told jurors that Mario Fernandez Saldana is the link between Tenen and Bridegan, but the defense really pointed their finger at Tenen as the killer and claims there is no evidence that puts Fernandez at the scene the night Jared Bridegan was killed.
Sanctuary Boulevard South was the site of his execution.
Day one of the trial for Mario Fernandez Saldana began with opening statements. Assistant State Attorney Christina Stifler went first, setting the scene of the night of February 16, 2022. She says Bridegan had just dropped off his 2 children at his ex-wife Shanna Gardner's house when he stopped his car to move a tire from the road. That's when she says a figure came out from the darkness and fired 4 rounds, 2 hitting the car and 2 hitting Bridegan.
Every parent's worst nightmare. To die not knowing if any of those bullets had hit his daughter.
His daughter, Bexley, who was just 2 years old at the time, was still strapped in her car seat. Stifler says investigators immediately began looking into Bridegan's life, but he didn't appear to have any debts or major issues with anyone around him besides his ex-wife. Stifler described their co-parenting relationship as nasty and petty and said Fernandez and Gardner got married out of convenience to help with this custody situation.
What will become apparent to you very quickly was the same fact that became apparent to those investigators years ago. No one in the world truly wanted Jared Bridegan dead.
That's when Stifler introduced Henry Tenen, the man accused of pulling the trigger the night Bridegan was killed. Stifler says Fernandez and Gardner paid Tenen, a former tenant, to kill Bridegan so Gardner could get full custody of their children and gain control of her family's trust money.
Henry Tenen, a tenant of Mario Fernandez, happened to kill the one person standing between this defendant and remaining in his marriage and profiting from that marriage to Shanna Gardner.
Henry Tenen is the shooter. There will be no dispute to that fact.
Attorney James Hill says all the evidence the state will bring forth points to Tenen as the killer, but nothing puts Fernandez at the scene the night of the shooting. Hill also says any money paid to Tenen from Fernandez was for actual work, and there are recordings to back up those claims.
You'll actually see video of him unloading tile from the back of his truck at Potomac doing work.
And both the state and the defense also brought up a man named John Biggerstaff. They say he is a close friend of Fernandez. The state told jurors that this man might have had something to do with the gun that was used to kill Jared Bridegan. They believe it was a 10mm Glock. The defense, though, says that Biggerstaff has maintained throughout the entire investigation that he does not know anything about this gun. He is expected to be called as a witness. Heather.
Riley Phillips, thank you. So as we go into day one of this trial recapping, I want to bring in our crime expert, Mark Bachman. Mark, you have experience investigating crimes, specifically murder for hire crimes, when you worked with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. You were in the courtroom all day long with me, listening intently to all the witnesses and to the opening statements. What really stood out to you the most today?
The state came out right away and laid out the evidence to the jury and explained it step by step, and then they put the witnesses in the right format to present that evidence going forward. The defense immediately objected. Even during the original statement of the state, they objected. So that's going to be the posture going forward with the defense. The defense is readily admitting that Tenen committed this crime, but they're doing everything they can to distance Fernandez from him. And of course, there's evidence that points to the contrary of that.
Now, when it comes down to motive, Mario Fernandez fell down to the first of three suspects, defendants, to go to trial. And when it comes to motive, we heard Jared Bridegan, Jared's widow, talk about just how tense the relationship was between she and her husband and Mario and his estranged wife, Shannon Garner.
Absolutely. It was acrimonious at best. I mean, they were constantly at each other's throats, I think, and they battled each other through 800 documents. They constantly, the only way they would communicate with one another is either email or text. They would not even verbalize things back and forth because they wanted to make sure that things were, kept in line and written down somewhere to prove what they were doing.
Now, we heard the prosecution in the opening statements mention 3 checks they found that Mario Fernandez had written Henry Tenen after this murder happened, totaling $10,000. Speak to that.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard time for the defense to explain that money away. I mean, it's sizable amounts of money, the last one being, I think, $5,000. Again, and did he do some work, and why didn't you pay him all at once? What work did he do? They were very vague on that. I mean, the thing that they actually challenged the most was the phone analytics. They're going to continue to do that. The FBI experts that handles that, they're going to challenge him because that phone activity ties them together, and it maps out how they did things leading up to Tenen committing the homicide.
And Henry Tenen, of course, was Mario Fernandez's former tenant, who we learned today had actually been evicted by Mario, but the defense saying that he did legitimate work for Mario. So we'll see. I saw the jurors listening very intently, taking notes throughout.
And I think the important part of it is, especially in Kirsten's testimony, is that the state brought it out as Kirsten and Jared did not know Tenen at all. Never had any work with him, and had no association to him. So how did he know when Jared was going to be there? How did he know any of this? Someone had to tell him.
Yeah, very interesting, Mark. Thanks for your analysis. We'll continue to check in with you throughout this trial. And coming up tonight at 5:30, we're going to have our legal analyst, Shannon Schott's going to be joining me, breaking down the legal aspects of day 1 of this trial. And if you'd like to watch, court's going to resume at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We are streaming it live on First Coast News Plus. But for now, I'll send it back into the studio to Jeannie and Anthony.
Back to day 1 of the murder trial involving the death of Jared Bridegan.
His widow, Jared Bridegan, taking the stand. Court has wrapped up for the day. And right now, our Heather Crawford is joining us now live outside the courtroom with our legal analyst to break down what we learned today in the courtroom.
Yeah, that's right, Anthony. The jury has gone home for the night after hearing opening statements for both the prosecution and the defense this morning. And then after lunch, they heard from a total of 5 witnesses today, all called by the state. Shannon Schott is our legal analyst who's been listening into this trial. And Shannon, a couple of things stood out to me. First, the first 2 witnesses that we heard from today were folks who pulled up on Jared Bridegan's car right after he had been shot. And they found his 2-year-old daughter strapped in the back seat, and they took her out and were trying to comfort her. And the 2-year-old said, "Daddy, Daddy, are the police coming?" And she described hearing a boom. But she was the only witness. The state made very clear that there are not other witnesses, so this case very much is circumstantial as it pertains to Mario Fernandez being involved in the murder of Jared Bridegan.
Absolutely. The testimony we heard today was really hard to hear. From Jared Bridegan to hearing from these Good Samaritans who tried to offer assistance, it was really hard for the jury and the family who was in the gallery to also hear. But yeah, there's a 2-year-old child who's now, I believe, 5 or 6, who is the only true witness to this crime. It is going to be very difficult for the state to be able to put together all of the pieces with all of the witnesses who are going to add a little bit to that story. Bit by bit, the state is hoping to get to a point where the jury can see a complete picture of a somewhat circumstantial case becoming much clearer for them to be able to render a guilty verdict in this case.
So initially, Mario Fernandez was charged with four counts. That was whittled down to 2. So tell me what the state has to prove, the 2 charges that he's facing.
So the first charge is a premeditated homicide, which that's, the first thing that they have to prove. And obviously we know that Jared Bridegan is dead. So obviously that element of that crime is something that they've already been able to establish. And then from the testimony today, now they have to prove that he did willingly and unlawfully participate in that homicide. And then when we talk about the solicitation, they are going to have to link Henry Tennant, who we know to be the gunman in this case, to this scheme to basically require him to go ahead and pull the trigger in this case. That's going to be rather difficult for the jury to make that logical leap in light of the fact that Henry Tennant was a legitimate tenant of Mario Fernandez and Shanna Gardner.
And Kirsten Bridegan was the second to last witness to testify today. That's Jared Bridegan's widow. And she made clear that she and her husband never met Henry Tennant, who both the state and defense say is the one who pulled the trigger. How, just kind of weigh in on her testimony today. She testified for about an hour, I think.
Yeah, her testimony was hard to listen to as well. Obviously, being the widow, she only has limited information to offer about the actual elements of the offense. However, it's important for the jury to understand the possible motives that could have been the reason that Mario Fernandez was even involved. Obviously, simply being married to someone who may or may not want to kill their ex-husband is not enough for the state to be able to prove this case. So being able to establish that there was a prior relationship there and that they did not get along, and even her admitting that she had a part in the turmoil, right? She agreed that she was not someone who got along with this party, and there were times when maybe she wasn't making an effort. However, I think the state really got ahead of any arguments that the defense might make about them instigating it or, causing the turmoil between the children and the families.
All right, Shannon, thank you for that analysis.
Thank you so much.
And tomorrow, the jurors will be back here at the Duval County Courthouse. Trial is set to get underway at 9 o'clock. The state expected to call more witnesses. I'll be in the courtroom along with a team of reporters there, and we will bring you more continuing coverage